feared and feared through Killarney. Now I'm back to hitching with the wind. But if Mickey Flynn should ever find me, I'll throw me call shin all behind me and square off on that son of a bitch again. He cracked open a river too, he beat me Sunday through and through, and such over my unconscious frame. I won me healthy sheriff fights, well lucky son still had me life since Mickey Flynn beat me dumb and lame.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to a St. Patrick's Day edition. Happy St. Patty's Day, everyone. A St. Patty's Day edition of the Chasing the Pennant podcast. I'm Biscuit. I'm back. I'm your host tonight. We have a lot of baseball Phillies related news to talk about tonight, specifically how our starting eight are going to perform offensively this season. But before we get into all that good stuff and the fun projections, Andrew, we'll start with you. How you doing tonight, my friend?
I'm doing very well. I hope everyone else is doing good as well. And I'm excited to finally break this down. It's been a while, I feel like, since I've been on one of these with you guys. So I'm excited. And we got a lot to talk about. We got some battles here down the stretch, and we're 15 days, I think it is, until opening day. So I could be more excited.
Awesome. And I was just saying to you guys before we started, Andrew, Rob, and I, we did this very similar podcast a year ago today. And it was really one of the first time I think we recorded together. I think that might have been the first time all three of us actually even recorded together. And, we had a lot of good laughs. We were excited about the season. And pandemic then happened. So that kind of put the kibosh in a lot of what we said. But, Rob, you were on that show. How have you been, man? It's been a while since we got to record together. So I'm excited to have you back on. But what's been new with you?
Yeah, it's been good. I missed you guys, missed recording this show throughout the course of the off season. But guess what? Baseball season's upon us. We're in spring training now. Less than a month until the season opens, and we'll be able to have 20,000 fans at Citizens Bank Park. So things are trending finally towards being normal once again. Hopefully we'll be there within, by the end of the season or something like that. But 20,000 fans, I mean, that's like a pretty much a normal, middle of the regular season game right there. So that's, some sense of normalcy returning with that. That'll be a fun thing. And it'll definitely be fun to be able to get down to Citizens Bank Park for some games this summer. So, yeah, everything's great. Baseball's upon us. Life's good.
Amen to that, Rob. Amen to that. And, you killed it there. It's going to be so refreshing to see fans in the stands. Now, obviously, you want to make sure everyone's being safe and hopefully everything goes well. And, thank God with the vaccinations continuing to be rolled out. We really look like we're on that path back to, as you mentioned, a real sense of normalcy. And that couldn't be more fantastic to hear, especially with fans in the stands. It's going to be beautiful. We have tickets. We were fortunate to get tickets for April 3rd's game, and I think I might seriously cry when I walk back into the ballpark. I don't know. I get really excited just thinking about it. But last but certainly not least, Joe Borek, the man, the myth, the legend. How are you tonight, my friend?
Doing well. Been talking a lot of hockey recently. Now excited to talk some baseball. As the great old song says, I say in the lyrics for Biscuit, put me in Biscuit, I'm ready to play today.
Amen.
Yeah. But like Rob said, I mean, lately with our Phillies, around 20,000 is about normal attendance. With our recent performances, one really gets kicking. But yeah, we could go with good season attendance. That's being a little generous. But I do really look forward to talking about all the things that are going on with this team. I'm excited to mention certain names as we get into this podcast because some guys before.
Yeah, it's certainly going to generate a bit of a discussion here. So pretty much for the show here, we're going to really focus solely on who we think the starting nine consistently are going to be over the regular season. Obviously, there's not going to be much debate with who those players are going to be, except for one position that we will get to later in the show. But for the most part, we're just going to go through what we really expected them in the 2021 season, what we think they're going to, do offensively, whether it's going to stay on par to what they've done consistently throughout their careers or have breakout years, or, maybe they're going to take, continuous step backs. But we'll have those conversations throughout the show. But really, we're going to go right off the bat, and we'll start at the beginning of the diamond with the catcher. No question that JT Realmuto is going to be the guy who gets most of the reps here for the catching position in the 2021 season. Just to gloss over the numbers, in 173 at-bats, he hit 266 with I believe he hit 11 home runs last year and about 32 RBIs. On base percentage, it was up, albeit the 60-game season. It was at 349, which I think would have been the highest mark of his career if it were obviously over a full season. But the OPS in the 840s, that's really, I think, where you want him to be. Andrew, we'll start with you. And at the end, we can kind of all go around and give our, I guess, projections and whatnot. But do you think you're going to see something similar to that from JT in 2021? And will he carry it over 162?
Yeah, I think the big thing with JT is obviously first his health with him battling that hand injury he had early on in spring. So he's obviously not going to get as many at-bats and games as we would have liked. So it's going to be interesting to see how he is out of the gate once opening day hits here. He is expected back, so that's a big thing for him. But I think there's nothing to worry about with JT. I think you know what you're going to get out of him. I think it will carry over. I understand last year was a shortened year, so yeah, the numbers might be skewed a little bit. But I think that's the big thing with JT, though. His whole career he's been consistent. So even in a longer year, and that's why it makes him the best catcher in the game. So I think one of the things I love watching JT, though, it makes it more exciting for me is his defense and his ability to do it both ways. Something that's rare from the catching position. I feel like today's game is usually either an offensive catcher or a defensive catcher. So my big thing with JT is just seeing the consistency, and it might take him a little bit to find his groove, obviously, again, with missing a lot of the spring training. But no, absolutely. I think it's going to carry over. I think the on-base percentage, the reason why I was up last year is I think we saw a lot of new approaches to the plate from a lot of different guys. So, again, I think it's going to carry over, and it's going to be a fun, exciting year. I'm interested to see where they'll put him in the batting order, if they'll continue at 4 like he was last season or move him around this season.
Yeah, certainly. You brought up a lot of great points. We'll start with the injury. I think the biggest thing we saw this offseason with JT and his market is that people really aren't going to go above and beyond and pay a catcher. Even, in a pandemic shortened season, that number wasn't going to be as luxurious as it, might have previously been had there not been a pandemic. But even so, people thought JT was going to get 130, 140. I even projected at one time 155 million, which was absolutely bonkers thinking about it now, since he only got $115.5 million. But the issue there is people are scared with catcher's health, especially as they start creeping into their 30s. Now, JT is still pretty young, but I'll go to you, Borek, here. Are you concerned at all about this? He's already missing time in camp. Not a great way. He still hasn't gotten any regular time at this point. You might think he's not ready for the opening day lineup, but are you concerned at all? Is what I'm asking here.
Girardi kind of talked about this today when I was watching the game. When it was Ricky Bottalico calling it today, interviewing Joe Girardi, which Andrew and I talked about that. I thought he did a good job. There's different ways to get reps at camp, because you're kind of running some simulated games, you're doing different things. You're running a lot of bullpen sessions as well, which JT started doing pretty quickly after his injury. So he's still kind of locked in and in tune with the staff. So that's a good sign where first and foremost, your job as a catcher is to manage your staff and get them where they need to be. And then it's to do what he does so well in the batting lineup, hitting the 11 home runs to 266 averages you aforementioned last year. So I think he'll be doing the biggest key for a catcher, which is we see him call a great game, look good behind the plate, staying down and calling a lot of bullpens and catching a lot of bullpens, I think will help him to be in better catching shape than some of us expected. So I think it's a concern for me a little bit, but this is JT Realmuto. He usually keeps his body in the most pristine shape. If it was other people, I might be more concerned. Like if it was the Buffalo Wilson Ramos, for example, I might be a little bit more concerned. But with someone that really keeps his body in good shape like JT, I think he'll be good coming back. And we've seen, obviously, he's not the best hitter, but in terms of calling the game and doing, like I said, the number one asset for a catcher is managing his pitchers. Knapp has become pretty damn good at doing that as well. So having those two, if you have to start him opening day, I don't have an issue with that for a couple games, and then JT's ready to just start kicking ass once he comes back.
Yeah, you said it right there. And the Philly sports aren't blessed with that many things in life. But if the Phillies can be happy about one thing, is that we do have a pretty good catching duo with JT and Andrew Knapp. And you said it, everything that makes JT great, he's still going to do. And even if he's not ready for opening day, you still have a guy like Andrew Knapp who can adequately take care of the role for a small duration of a time period. But you also, I want to call back to something Andrew brought up earlier. And this is really a discussion. I'll start with Rob, but if anyone wants to chime in here, feel free to do so. Where's JT going to bat in the lineup? And it's really interesting because we haven't seen him play a spring training game yet in the starting lineup, so we don't really know what Girardi's thinking at this point, I guess. But I think he doesn't really profile much as your typical number 4 driving in runs, power hitter. But that's where he was, for the most part of the 2020 season. Rob, do you think he's going to stay in that 4 spot, or do you think with the emergence of Alec Boehm, he'll get shifted around a little bit?
I want to start off by saying it's a shame we don't have Sean here to kind of pump Andrew Knapp's tires like he always does. I'm sure he'll do that a lot throughout the season. But to answer your question, I see some fluidity for JT's spot in the lineup. We've seen him bat 2 before. He's been successful there. You can plug him into the 4 hole, although maybe not the ideal guy for that spot. He can certainly get the job done. Really, anywhere between 4, 5, 6, I could see him moving around a little bit. And then, as I said, getting involved in that 2 spot every once in a while as well, and maybe even the 3 spot too. So, yeah, I mean, I'll expand it a little bit. Anywhere between 2 and 6, he's probably going to get a little bit of time there. I think that he's probably going to get the most time, I would say, at the 4 or 5 spot there. Just given what they have in their lineup. They have such good depth in that lineup. They have a whole bunch of guys who you can plug into various spots in the lineup, and that's a great thing because you can do so many different things with that. But at the end of the day, I think we see JT. I'll go with the 5 spot. I think the 5 spot is probably where he gets the lion's share of his at-bats.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing, Rob. I think the 4 spot's probably where he'll end up being. And I think that's, I think Alec Boehm would be probably the best option in that role. But I think given that, he's still very young in his career, you don't really know how exactly he's going to perform over a full season, that Girardi might be still a little hesitant to give him that role automatically. But I think it's it's JT's to lose, and I think there is a possibility if things aren't breaking JT's way, he could lose it to Boehm or maybe Hoskins if JT goes into the 2 hole. But as you mentioned, there's a lot of ways to kind of play around with it from there. But I'll go first to kind of give my official 2021 prediction here for JT's stat line in 2021. Like I said, this doesn't need to be anything groundbreaking. If you guys want to do batting average, home runs, RBIs, maybe on base percentage, OPS plus, whatever you guys want to throw at me, I'll go first. So batting average for me probably in the high 260s, low 270s. Run of the mill for JT, so probably about like 25 home runs, around 70 to 80 RBIs. Is that off par with whatever you guys might be thinking? Does someone have something different out there that they want to throw in?
I would say, depending on how many games he plays, I think his RBI total might be a little more, especially if he's in that 4 spot, just because you expect the guys at the top of the order to get on base. So I'd say, outside of that, I think you're spot on with a lot of the numbers, high 260s, and then probably around 25 home runs. It's a shame last year was a short year. He probably would have had his career high in home runs. So we'll see where that goes. But I think he'll be around the 90, low 90 to mid to, I think probably about mid 90s for RBIs.
I'd honestly be pretty surprised if he got up to the mid 90s, especially if he's creeping towards 100. I'm a little bit of a pessimist on that, but Rob, what do you think?
I'd say around the same RBI. I could see him pushing 100, although I think that depending where he's in the lineup, if Bryce is ahead of him, which he should be, I think Bryce is going to drive in the lion's share of the runs and kind of leave the scraps to JT. So yeah, I think 90 to 95 is a good ballpark to have him in there.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you guys. I think it really does depend on where he's batting. He's not going to get 90 to 100 RBIs if he's in the 2 hole, but likely chance he might if he's in the 4 hole or maybe even the 6 hole. He has an outside chance as well. But Borek, what do you think?
Well, that's what I was going to say, Biscuit, what you just said. If he's batting second, which, if that's the case, I would see him more being in the high 70s to mid 80s somewhere, territory at most. If he's batting in the 4 or 5 hole, then I could see him being where Rob and Andrew's quota is, which is more like right at 90 to the 95 territory. So I think it really depends where he's more consistently in the order by Joe Girardi. But in terms of average, I would see that being high 260s, around 270, like you were saying, Biscuit. His on his OPS plus should probably be like it was last year, somewhere in the good 120 range, and be a great catcher with throwing guys out yet again. Probably have a few more stolen bases since it was only a condensed season last year. So I look for him to be a factor in all facets like he was last year, and especially when he first got here. So I think JT's going to have a great season again. It just factors, is he going to be batting second most of the time, or will he be in that 4 or 5 hole? So second, more mid 80s max. 4 or 5 hole, I would be right where Andrew and Rob are, around like 90 to 95.
Awesome. Well, we'll transition on then from catcher to the man, the myth, the legend. I know that's the second time I said that on the show, but Rhys Hoskins, first baseman. So just to gloss over the 2020 numbers, 10 home runs, 245 batting average, about a 137 OPS plus, 887 OPS, slugging 503, on base percentage 384. He kind of had an interesting season in that he really picked it up for like a 3 to 4 week stretch, or maybe I'd say about maybe a little over a month stretch, where he really got hot. He started the season off. He was still productive because he was still getting on base a lot, but the power really wasn't there. Like, he didn't really have, many home runs in his first batch of games. He really, really got hot, and then he went down with that injury that ended his season. But, like I said, kind of solid numbers overall. The interesting thing with Rhys Hoskins, though, is that I feel like people either love him or hate him. Like, no one's really in between on Rhys Hoskins, which kind of shocks me, because even if people have, things to say about the kind of ball player he is, he's still a great guy, very humble dude, good in the clubhouse, very likable, engaging personality. But what do you think the real hole was in Rhys Hoskins' game that makes him so unlikable to some people that think he should be, traded or whatnot? I'll start with you here, Rob. Like, if you think there is one, what's the real downside of a player like Rhys Hoskins, other than the fact that he doesn't really hit for a high batting average?
Well, it's the inconsistency. It's the fact that, he had that great start a couple of years ago and then had that awful second half. And then, as you alluded to, the slow start last year and then kind of getting it together towards the end there. I think that a lot of fans, they were kind of pumped up by that great start that he got off to in his career, where he was just hitting every ball out of the ballpark when he first came up. And instead of building on that, he kind of plateaued a little bit and didn't really, become, I guess, the star or superstar that a lot of fans were kind of expecting. But yeah, to answer your question, it's the inconsistency. It's the fact that he can't put together solid performances, on a consistent basis throughout the course of the season. He's either hot or he's cold. There's no in between with him. So I think that's where the frustration lies with the fan base.
That's fair. And actually, oh my gosh, guess what, guys? Today's Rhys Hoskins' birthday. Happy birthday, Rhys Hoskins. I was looking at his page on Baseball Reference. Just a little tidbit here. If you look at Rhys Hoskins, his positions, it's listed first baseman and left fielder. And when I saw left fielder, I got war flashbacks to him in the outfield in 2018. But Rob, to go back to everything you just said, I hear you. I do and I think you're right. I think a lot of people really drew this perception of him when he came up, hit the 18 home runs, really looked like he was going to be a cornerstone player for this organization, as the MLB The Show 2020 would quote it, a perennial all-star for years to come.
I think they changed them when he said that.
But my point being, I really see a lot of value with the kind of player Rhys Hoskins is. Even if he is a little streakier, inconsistent at times, he does kind of go on those waves where he's really hot and can carry a team for a whole month. And I think that's kind of how a lot of Phillies hitters are. I don't think he's the only one to fault for that. I do think, him not hitting for a higher batting average is another thing that people find really unattractive about him. Even if the on-base percentage, slugging, OPS plus is up, if he's still hitting home runs and getting on base, as long as he's doing those things, I really think you have a fine player in Rhys Hoskins if he's doing those things at an adequate level. But Borek, what do you think with Rhys Hoskins in 2021?
Well, I think it's also when you have the DH, which they now didn't put in this year again, you have a much better player in Rhys, because Rhys is able to be a DH and focus just primarily on hitting, since his biggest Achilles heel, when it doesn't, other than the inconsistencies on offense that Rob covered very well, is defense. So if he doesn't have to play defense, he can be a hell of a lot better, because then all he has to focus on is offense. So you're just one primarily focused rather than split focused, where he probably has some woes on offense simply because of how pissed off he gets on some plays he misses on defense. And I know that just from playing myself, I would used to get fucking ticked at times and I made a bad play on defense, and that would affect my offense. So but Rhys, I think, would be the best guy as a DH. It's a shame it's not in this year. But I think that's why people get annoyed too, because sometimes in the same games, I was at games where he'll have a key strikeout, then have a play that probably even Ryan Howard would have made at first base because he used to be pretty underrated at fielding in his prime at time, where you'd be like, well, shit, you struck out earlier and missed a play at first base. Like, this is really annoying. So that's why I think it's like a love-hate at times with people with Rhys. And if he could just be that steady Eddie hitter, then people won't worry about the defense regardless. Or they bring the DH back next year in the new CBA, and then people don't have to worry about his defense in general because he's not playing defense. So I think that's the big key for Hoskins. Just focus on hitting, because his hitting is where you make your bread and butter, and then people are not going to remember if you make defensive issues if you're hitting as one of the best first basemen in baseball, which he has the potential to do. We saw it at times. We just haven't seen it consistently in a while.
I agree about the DH. I think the Phillies not having the DH this year obviously hurts the team. A lot of different guys, Hoskins could take some time there. Kutch to get time off the field. Obviously, we'll talk about him in a little bit. Harp to get some days out of the field to DH. It could really benefit a lot of those guys, even more so than just having one player as the designated hitter. But with that being said, though, to talk about the defensive side of things a bit here, I don't think Rhys Hoskins is the guy who should be the first one if the DH comes back to automatically be the guy who we'd assume would go to that position. I think there's a lot of different things to consider there. Obviously, if Kutch is officially done with the Phillies, it kind of, takes him out of the plan here. But if Kutch does return, maybe he has a good season.
That's what I was assuming. That's what I was just assuming, because his contract expires. I was just going off of who's on contract. You
also have guys like Alec Boehm. You don't know how he's going to be defensively. Now, the Phillies seem a little higher on him defensively this year, but, based on what we saw last year, it wasn't anything to glamour about. He could very well be a candidate. And as we're going to talk about once we move on to the middle infield here, they might be adding, so they're really going to have to shuffle around this infield a lot, either making a trade of one of the middle infielders and or moving some combination of either Rhys Hoskins or Alec Boehm to the designated hitter role. But while we're on Hoskins, Andrew, I'll jump over to you here. I feel like you're kind of a guy who likes Rhys Hoskins, is kind of a guy who, a fan of his. I feel like you never really have anything too negative to say about him. What do you really expect from him in 2021?
Hey, you're right. I'm a guy that like Hoskins, and I think the big thing with me and Hoskins is I like how, and this is where I'm going to disagree with Joe on some points, is how he doesn't let his struggles at the plate affect him at sometimes, because he struggles at the plate at some points, but he's able to adjust to the game, and he knows, okay, I'm not hitting the ball right now. I'm going to find a way to get on base. Like, you look at his average. Yeah, he only hit 245 last year, but his on base percentage is significantly higher than that, and it's at 384. So yeah, he might be struggling at the plate. And
No,
not
I
hitting the
didn't
ball
say
as
that.
well.
I said how his defense affects his offense at times, not how if he can't
That's
hit,
what
he
I'm saying.
can't.
I disagree with you. Like, I don't think the negative part in that one area affects his game at all. He's able to adjust and adapt and find his strengths in the areas that he might be struggling in, but he knows how well his game is in other sorts, and he's going to go and out and still perform and not let that stuff affect him. I think he's able to have a quick mindset and get past that, and you saw that throughout the season. I think that's one spot he does need to be more consistent with is against righties. I mean, if you look at his lefty versus righty splits, he hit 341 against lefties with 4 home runs and 12 RBIs and only 41 at bats, and had an on base percentage of above 500. And then compared to righties, his average is down 209. So I think that's the spot for Hoskins. I need to see more consistency from his right-handed pitching this year.
You know who that reminds me of? Jason Worth. Remember when Worth first came over from the Rule 5 draft? Charlie Manuel would always say, you got to hit righties consistently to really make it in this league. And then, lo and behold, he makes a shit ton of money from the Washington Nationals because he starts to hit right-handers. Maybe that's what Hoskins can become, the next Worth type guy that just all of a sudden gets consistent with righties. For me, yes, he gets on base. I just find the same things you hear Red fans say about Votto, where it's like, yes, I love that his on base percentage is great. Bravo, yippee-ki-yay. But I would like to see you hit more because we know you can do that. Hoskins sometimes take pitches where you know him and you know with Votto's level, both of them can hit it, but they would rather walk. Where I appreciate getting on base, but when you have the power of him, I would also see you rather hit a 3-run homer. So it's kind of a balancing act at the same time where you get that one good pitch and you just take it right down the middle on a 3-0 and then you take a 3-1 walk. So with guys like Votto and Hoskins, it is a balancing act.
That's part of being in the 2 spot. If you're in the 4 spot, yeah, you're going to look for that power. But for me, if Girardi keeps him in the 2 spot this year, I'm looking for Hoskins to get on base more than hit home runs. He needs to get on base and let Bryce Harper and JT and then Alec Boehm hit him in. Like, for me, if he – again, that's where I'm interested to see where they put JT. If they're going to move Hoskins back to 4, then, yeah, you need to see the power numbers go up. But, like, if he's going to stay in that 2 spot, I don't need to have him hit 40 home runs this year. I just need him to find ways to get on base and let JT and Bryce drive him in.
Amen.
But I don't think he should be in the 2 spot, though, because the 2 spot.
But that's where he was, whether he should or not be. That's where he is. So he's going to hit to that 2 spot where he is.
Well, no, I understand that. I'm just saying to play to his strengths, I don't think he should be there because I would tell you it's the same thing with JT. I'm going to project his stats a hell of a lot differently if he's in the 2 spot to the middle of the order.
But Borek, like, he honestly, like, Rhys Hoskins only hit 30 plus home runs once in his entire career. Not to say he can't do it, and not to say he doesn't have power and that he should use his power more. And I do agree with you to an extent. He should, sometimes he's a little too selective. And you're right, he misses on pitches that he could probably destroy. But with that being said, I think if he's getting on base and setting the table, and when that lineup turns over, he's the second hitter you're facing. That's a fearsome hitter who's either going to work you down.
Yeah, but he's not fast. Like, I'm traditional. I don't want a guy, too, that's slower than all of us on this podcast that is not able to round the bases. That's more what it is.
If you have, the bottom of the lineup, getting on base, Kutch getting on base, and then he's there, you either have to try to dance around him, and he's got a great eye, so he's not going to, swing at junk, or you're going to have to throw him fastballs. And if he's getting pitches down the plate, he's going to crush them. And whether he's batting 250 doing that or 300, as long as he's working those at bats, hitting the balls he should hit, driving in those runners at the top of the when the bottom of the lineup turns around, or setting up for Bryce, I think that's a successful Rhys Hoskins there. But to run through the numbers, I went first the last time. Rob, you start. What do you think Rhys Hoskins is going to do kind of stat line wise in 2021?
Stat line wise, assuming that I'd put him probably in the 140, 145 game mark, assuming he's probably going to miss a couple games with injuries and just getting days off. I'm going to put him right at 30 home runs on the dot. I want to go higher, but I feel like he's going to endure another cold streak that'll prohibit that. I'm going to put him right at 30 homers. I'm going to put that average at between 250 and 255. I think it comes up a little bit, but not remarkably so. And the ribbies, I think he's going to be right around 100 there.
Good.
So
I think that's pretty fair. I think that's pretty fair all around.
So yeah, the power numbers, the RBIs will be great. The average will leave a little bit to be desired, but that's about what to expect with him being the power hitter that he is. You're not going to get a great average, and I think the walks, he does a good job drawing walks, so the on base percentage will be up too.
Good. Yeah, I think that. I think that's fair. I think that's overall really what he's going to do, and I think that's fine. Like I said, as long as he's working those at bats, he's still getting walks, he's still setting up for Bryce or driving in the bottom of the lineup. I'll take that. I think that's fair. Borek, what do you think?
I like what Rob went with because I also had 30 home runs written down. So great minds think alike, Rob. Big things, 30 homers. I think he has a better chance of getting over the 100 RBI plateau if he's in the 4 spot than the 2 spot. I see him more in the high 80s batting 2, just due to the fact that you're not going to, statistically speaking, probably have as much high RBI chances in the 2 spot as the 4 spot. But that he still will have a hell of a season of being, I'm going to say, anywhere from 248 to 252, because I think he'll start hitting righties a bit better, but he'll really feast on the lefties even to more of a degree this year, hit righties to more of like a league average power hitter level, so that'll bring his average overall up, and he'll be, I'm going to say, at like 93 RBIs with 30 home runs, so in the low to like right borderline mid 90s, and have a good season, good bounce back season, probably playing around, like Rob said, 150-ish games. So I'll put him right there. I just would prefer him being a focal point in the part of the order because I'm just old school like that. I'm traditional. I would rather I see Kutch having to speed back, lead him off. If Quinn's doing really well, I see him as a prototype. He's doing well right now, hitting 300. If he doesn't get injured until he does, he could be your 2 guy that sets up speed. And then if Hoskins smokes one in the alley, both of those guys score. So I kind of see it like that a little bit more, but that would be my prediction for Reese.
All right, awesome. And last but certainly not least, Andrew.
I'm going to say he's going to hit around high 250s, low 260s. He'll hit about 30. I'm going to go 35 home runs and 98 RBIs. And that's one thing too. Like if you look at his numbers last year, he played in 40 games. So if you dragged it out to 160, he would have got about 40 home runs last year and 104 RBIs around there. So I mean, that's why I don't understand the hate for him. So I'm gonna say he's gonna do that. So I'm gonna say about 35 home runs and about 98 RBIs and then a 258, 260 average.
Yeah, it's a combination of what everyone kind of reiterated. RBIs for me probably in the 80 to 100 range, depending on where he bats in the lineup. Home runs 30 to 35. My number that I written down, Andrew, was 35 too. But like I said, I think you take that. Whether he's batting in the 2 hole or the 6 hole. Rhys Hoskins, they're paying too many guys on this team who should be stars or can be stars. You really don't need that kind of production from Rhys Hoskins. You just need someone who, comes up with the big at-bat when the situation's present. And I think, he might have started off a little slow last season, but he really picked that up. But we're going to transition to a player that I'm really interested to see what you guys have to say about him, because I think we're going to have a lot of discussion here. And I kind of want to gloss these 2 players over together, with Gene Segura at second base and Didi Gregorius at shortstop, because I think a lot of what we're going to talk about is going to overlap between these 2 players. But we'll start primarily with Gene and move to Didi afterward. But guys, I have to mention, I don't know if there's something glitching out on Baseball Reference's page, but if this is correct, today is also Gene Segura's birthday. So happy birthday, Gene Segura. Phillies must have a lot of March baseball birthdays, but Anyway, 266 batting average in 2020, 1.4 WAR, 347 on base percentage. That's actually pretty good. You'd like to see that a little bit more from him next season. OPS 769. You take that from someone like Gene Segura. I think the only thing there is that you wish his batting average was a little higher, but certainly not a terrible 2020 season. But it's interesting with Gene. He's here. He was here since 2019. I believe he has 2 more years on his contract. Well, this season plus next year. It's kind of an interesting predicament with him. Do you think? Are you pleased with what we've got? And I'll start with you, Rob, here. Are you pleased with what we got out of Gene Segura since we've acquired him in the offseason, right before the 2019 season?
Well, I know a lot of people were frustrated, and so was I, at kind of the way that he ended his first season in Philly. He got off to that really strong start, had the average well over 300, and everything was looking promising. And then really it was right around that time that he made that base running gaffe in San Diego that resulted in Kutch blowing out his knee. I think that got to him mentally, and he was on the downtrend from that point on that season. I think a lot of fans were frustrated with that. I think he did bounce back, at least offensively. He had a pretty solid year last year. I mean, the average is 266. It's nothing remarkable. But, the 7 homers, 25 RBIs, that's decent for a hitter like him. I do want to see that average come up a little bit. We all know that he's capable of pushing that 300 mark. I would like to see that. So all things considered, I am a little bit disappointed, at least from an average perspective. I want to see that come up. If he can do that and kind of maintain the power numbers and the extra base hits, I think it'll be successful, and I think fans will like what they see from him. And defensively, do want to see him be a little bit better, but then again, you could say that about just about everyone in that Phillies infield. So, yeah, I want to see the average come up. That's my big thing.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think that's really all you can ask for Gene Segura. He's a contact hitter. He's not known for, getting on base at a ridiculous high clip. He's not really much of a walk guy. He's a slap hitter. And I think, some of what you mentioned, Rob, the Andrew McCutchen incident, some of the gaffes he made last season, I think really, as you mentioned, that got to him. But I think too, John Maley and the hitting regime from the 2018 season, 2019 season, I think that played a part of it as well, because you really saw him starting to pull balls more. Everything he kind of looked like it was trying to be like an uppercut swing, rather than that kind of like smooth, easy stroke that he had that, allowed him to have, pretty good contact on the ball. So I want to see him continue to get away from that. I'd rather just see Gene Segura hit singles or line drive doubles. It doesn't need to be anything too flashy with him. And just to gloss over defensively, I think him moving to second base from shortstop is going to be huge for him. You do hope to see more from him, a little bit more on the offensive side, but defensive wise, I think he'll be fine. But Andrew, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm kind of with Rob. I'm a Segura fan. I hope he kind of turns it around. I think there's a few things that kind of mess with him a little bit, and that goes. I think Rob's right. I think the whole McCutchen incident kind of messed with him. And then, if I remember correctly, I think toward the end of that 2019 year, I think he was battling an ankle injury or some type of foot injury that really kind of hurt him. Because I think for most of that year, he was still hitting above 300 until I think he had a really bad September. And I think. And last year was just tough on everybody, obviously, with everything going on. So last year's stats in some ways are tough to kind of deal with, because you don't know what kind of year it would have been if there was any type of normalcy last year. So I think, and I'm with you too, Biscuit. Like, I think he kind of has bought into too much of the launch angle stuff and everything that we see, that a lot of these kind of hitting coaches, like you said, with Malley coming in and how they kind of treated his hitting, they kind of try to change his approach. And we talked about where people should hit in the order. And when Segura's on, I think he's honestly, if he kind of gets back to that 18 Seattle year, when he's on, he might be your best typical, quote unquote, traditional 2-type hitter, kind of just continuing to get on that on base approach and kind of just getting some type of single or maybe getting a double in the gap somewhere. going into that heart of the order. So for me, that's what kind of where I want to see Segura go back to as well, is get back to that pure contact hitter rather than trying to hit home runs. Because a lot of times, even in big situations where you're used to him going for singles, I felt like second and third or bases loaded, it looks like he's trying to swing the hit one out of the park, and he was swinging out of his shoes. And that was the issue I saw with him.
Yeah, he like I said, that awkward uppercut swing where he would fall to his one knee, when he's trying to do it. And that's not who Gene Segura is. That's not what made him 13th in MVP voting back in 2016. That's not what made him an all-star. What made him an all-star was making consistent contact, getting on base by hitting those types of singles, line drive doubles. You don't need to be some power hitter. That's not you. That's not who you are in the lineup. And I agree with you. I think the approach with John Malley kind of I think it messed up a lot of those guys, and Segura being one of them. And when you said it, when he's on, he's good. And for his sake, for 2021, he needs to be good because there's a lot of talk. I think it was a John Heyman tweet. Of course, it was a John Heyman tweet. He started talking about the 2021-2022 free agent class of shortstops, one of the best shortstop classes it's going to be of all time. Just to go through the names, guys like Corey Seager, Carlos Correa, Francisco Lindor, Trevor Story, Javier Baez, a very talented group of individuals who a lot of teams are going to be in on, and the Phillies were listed in Heyman's tweet as one of the teams that will most likely be heavily in on this group of individuals. But that's interesting for a number of reasons. One, because you just signed Didi Gregorius to a 2-year deal, who will have a position have a contract for this team, and will be, you would expect, at least in the mix in some regard. And then what does that do with Bryson Stott? What does that do with Scott Kingery? What does that do with, guys like Rhys Hoskins, Alec Bohm? That really, adding another person to this mix really already adds to a thick group of infielders. So I know I just threw a lot of names out there, but Borek, really, you'll start here, but if anyone wants to jump in here, if they bring in a shortstop, you would think they're going to play shortstop. So what happens with Gene and Didi here? I don't see them trading Didi. Do you think it's Gene that's going to get moved? Do they, I don't know what they would do. Yeah. Gene Segura is an everyday starter. It's not like they'd bench him, but what do you think would be done in that type of situation?
Well, I can't also remember when is Gene's contract status done? Through 2022, through next year he's signed, or
done after 2022, so end of next.
Okay. I think you would probably move him on the last year, and then Didi would end up doing what Gene did this year and end up moving, like he ended up playing different positions last year, of course, since we had Didi, to second. And then you would have, obviously, if you got a Corey Seager, as much as I don't love this guy, but got a Carlos Correa, got a Javier Baez, got one of those guys, a Trevor Story, you're obviously going to let them play short. So you would move, I would say, Didi to second. But I think Segura, in terms of what I think could do, Andrew kind of stole my thunder with that. I think he is the perfect two-hole hitter if he does well, which is probably surprising for Andrew to hear since I usually rip Segura. But if he starts doing well, I think he is the perfect two-hole hitter for this year, because if he does that, that brings back his best value in my eyes. So you're able to do what you just presented, Biscuit, get the best trade value for him in the offseason, move Didi Gregorius to second base, and then bring in whatever shortstop, whether it's Seager. My top two would be Seager and Story, but that's just me. Or if you bring in Baez and Correa. So either way, that sets us up the best nicely. Then when it comes to Stott and those guys, I would say, like I said, let Hoskins, if he doesn't field as well, go to DH. If Bohm does good at third, you can leave him at third. If not, you can let him field at first, and then maybe Bryson can play third. So you have some options there, and I think it's good options to have, because if you bring in one of those guys, it's a good problem to have and have to figure out how to fit the pieces of the puzzle otherwise. Where Kingery, I think, is not going to play much infield. He seems like Girardi likes him as a super utility or play infield, outfield. I don't know if we'll ever see him fully get locked down. He might just dump Ben Zobrist on this team if he can ever start.
Yeah, I think if there's really an odd man out who I think would get moved in that type of situation, because I do think you'd have to move someone. It would be most likely Gene Segura. But in terms of playing time, obviously you mentioned Scott Kingery. I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about him in a little bit with center field and our thoughts with him there. Really, it's looked abysmal so far in spring training. It's really tough to see because you really want the guy to succeed, but he has not looked that good. But jumping back over to Didi, you mentioned second base, maybe doing what you did, as you said, Borek with Gene, moving him over to second. But I could also see him going to third if Alec Bohm doesn't stick at third. I could see him going over there for a season to make room for a new shortstop. But there's a lot of different ways to play around with it for sure. And you're right, it's a good problem to have at one point because now you have an influx of guys that you can do a lot of different things with that ultimately all relatively help the team. So since we talked about both, I'll go. I'll have Rob. You go first here. Give me Gene Segura, and then you could do Didi as well. We could get these two birds with one stone here.
Okay. So this upcoming season, I mentioned I want to see that batting average be a little bit higher for Gene, and I think it will. I don't think he quite reaches 300. I want to say, I'll put him in at 283, somewhere between 280 and 285. So 283 sounds nice. I'm going to put him in at 17 home runs, and I think he pushes about 75 RBIs, somewhere around that ballpark. I do want to see the on-base percentage go up a little bit as well, and I think it will. But, yeah, I'd say somewhere in the low 280s, 17 homers, 70 to 75 RBIs.
I'd be impressed if he got up to 70, 75 RBIs. Maybe even 17. He's gotten 20 before in his career, so maybe he can get up there. I think more you're looking in the 10 to 15 range. But Borek, what do you think?
When it comes to Gene Segura, as you like to call him, Biscuit, mean Gene Segura. Huh?
I said mean Gene, baby.
Yeah. But I think 70s is a little high for him. I would say more like 65 RBI since he was in the 60s for us in the full season. His career average is 285, so I would say I'm kind of around Rob there. I'll just say I'll put him smack on his career average or have him hit right at his evenness this year at 285. I would say home runs around 12 and put him at 65 RBI total. Like I said, because I think he should, if he does start hitting well, I completely agree with Andrew, really stay slotted in at the number 2 spot and really solidify that number 2 spot if he starts doing what you mentioned, Biscuit, primarily in your take as well, slapping it around the field and just becoming Gene Segura again like we saw in his D-backs days towards the end and primarily in Seattle when he just hit to all fields really well compared to last year when, like Andrew brought up, he was swinging above it a bit to try to hit homers, which is not him. So I expect a better bounce-back season from him this year.
Okay, Andrew, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that. I think he'll hit probably around 15 home runs, probably about 65 to 70 RBIs. I think his average is going to climb back up a little bit. I don't think he'll hit the 300 mark, but I'm going to say like 292 to 293. But one spot, and Rob, you mentioned on base percentage, which I agree with too, a little bit higher for him. But I want to see him kind of get back. And I know he's not no 40-game stealer like he used to be back in 2013. But I kind of want to see him get more than, like last year, he only had 2 stolen bases the entire year. And then the year before that, only 10. I want to see him kind of get back up to that 15 to 20 range in stolen bases if he can, just because I think that's a spot the Phillies have kind of lacked here in recent years. So that's one area I want to see him, if he can, try to get back for that.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I never realized that Gene Segura was a bit of a speedster before he came to the Phillies, which is pretty interesting to see. Yeah, definitely. And I think coming from him could be a sneaky kind of speed like in the lineup that people really aren't anticipating. Like I think when you think Phillies and our fastest guys, you think guys like Roman Quinn, Scott Kingery. Those are really the ones you'd expect really to kind of steal bases. Maybe Bryce Harper every once in a while, but if we could get that from Gene Segura again, plus batting average going back up, on base percentage going back up. I don't need the home runs to be 15 to 20, or I don't even need the RBIs to be in the 60 to 70 range. As long as he's, hitting and getting on base at a decent clip and setting up the lineup for the bottom of the order, because he's probably going to be in the 7 hole or the 7 spot. That's really all I want for him. So I'm going to be candid here and say that I do think we're going to see probably the best season Gene Segura has had as a Philly. I do think it's very possible that he hits over 300. I think he would have continued to trend upward if we had a longer season. He did seem to get hotter as the season went on. So I do think it's possible. But I just realized no one gave their numbers for Didi as well. So I'll start and go with Didi, then we'll just go around the horn real fast. Didi, I do think his 2021 numbers are going to dip a little bit from what they were in 2020. I don't think you're going to see the batting average stay as high as it did. I think that's going to drop into the 260s, and I think his on-base percentage is probably going to fall to where it typically is, probably in the 320s range, which isn't as glamorous. But if you're still getting that player who's hitting about 20 to 25 home runs, which is what I anticipate to get from him, and his OPS still hovers around 800, I think that's fine. Rob, I'll start with you here. What do you think about Didi Gregorius and 2020?
First of all, my apologies. You did ask me to do both Segura and Gregorius. I completely missed out on that. But to answer your question, yeah, I agree. He's going to dip a little bit. I think the average would probably dip a little bit. It was up at 284, which is a little bit high for him. I think it dips down, I would say high 260s. I'll say 269, just because I like 69. Homers, I'm going to go 23 home runs for him. I think that's a nice number there. RBIs, I think he's going to be probably around the 80-ish mark, I want to say. But yeah, so yeah, high 260s, low 270s, although I think it's more likely in the 260s batting average wise, low 20s for homers, and somewhere around probably 85 RBIs.
Yeah, that seems, like I said, I think with Didi you can kind of, I think the home run numbers might be a little bit higher. Like, I do think it's possible that he can hit around 30 home runs, just given the kind of ballpark that Citizens Bank Park is. I do think that's not out of the realm of possibilities, but everything else really sounds about what I'm thinking there. 260 batting average, around 80-ish RBIs seems reasonable. Borek, what do you think?
When it comes to Didi, I agree with a lot of what Rob said. I mean, last year he had 40 RBIs in only 60 games. So that would be somewhere at least in the 80s. I would put him more in a full season. I think his average would tick down, but his RBIs, I could see him even being high 80s, so I'll put him at 88. I think his average is going to be 266, and his in terms of on base and all that, I think his OPS will go down. I mean, it was really high last year for his career. His OPS was a 119. His average is a 100. So I would say probably like his on base numbers will be like about an 820 instead of an 827, and maybe like a 112 OPS plus instead of a 119, since that was by far some of his highest numbers. So you see him come back down to earth in some facets, but I think he will have great RBI output, which will be around 88, like I said.
Yeah, I think it depends a lot, too, where he bats. And I think, unlike guys like Hoskins or JT or Bohm, I think there's a little less discussion. I think he's going to be in the 5 or 6 spot, depending on matchups and whatnot. It's, I think, where he batted for the most part last season, and he did relatively well there. So I think 80 RBIs is pretty, reasonable and on par to what he'll do. But last but certainly not least, Andrew, what do you got for me?
Yeah, I think I see him kind of he's back with Girardi out again, obviously. That's why I think his average has always been a lot better than it was when he kind of left the Yankees originally. And I think the big thing here with him, the big thing with Gregorius is with Girardi. I mean, you look at 17 and 16. I think he's going to have similar years to his 16 and 17 season. He hit 276 and 16 and 287 and 17. So I think it's going to be a little bit in between there. I'm going to say about right at 280, kind of like last year. He's never been really a guy to walk. So his on-base percentage will always probably be similar to what his average is, couple points higher than that, so probably around 300, 305-ish. So I'm going to agree kind of about the 85 RBI range for Gregorius, and then maybe about 25 home runs. I think that's where we're seeing him. And Borek, you mentioned it, he had the 40 in the 60 games. So I mean, if you just times that by 2, he's got 80 in 120 games. So I think that's where he's at. I think he benefits extremely well from where Girardi has him in that order, with Harper, JT hitting in front of him, and even Hoskins getting on base. So he's going to have a plethora of opportunities to hit and run. So I expect him to do it again this year, to be honest, just because he's always done it with Girardi.
Yeah, I think that would, if you get 280 out of Didi Gregorius, the steal is a steal. The steal is a steal. If he's hitting 280, OPS on base percentage in the 330, 340 range, and he's giving you that 20 to 25 home run power that he has, if not more. You win the steal by a landslide. I would love that production. I do think the batting average is going to be a little lower. I don't think he'll hit 280. I'd be mesmerized if he did, but I'll take that. I think that's fair. I think that's fair all around the board. And now we're going to move to our last position on the infield. The stud, the star, one might say the cornerstone third baseman of the Phillies' future, Alec Bohm. Now, Alec, he this little gem, he came up last season, played I think about 40. I want to say he played about 45 games. I'm not 1,000% sure on that, but I think he played 44. So he played 44 games.
You were off by one. Yep.
I was off by one damn game. He was just a delight. He was phenomenal. He batted .338, on base percentage .400, slugging .481, OPS .881, second in Rookie of the Year voting. I think even when the Phillies were blowing leads and making us want to bang our heads on walls and whatnot, watching Alec Bohm break out into the majors was such a fun thing to do in 2020. He's got a lot of talent. I'm really looking forward to what he's able to do, not just next season or this upcoming season, but for the rest of his career. I'm already really in love with the guy. I bought an Alec Bohm jersey. I'm very high on him, and I think most people are as well. So I'll start with you here, Borek. We'll begin with you. Really, what kind of step forward do you think Alec Bohm is going to take? Do you think the power is going to develop a little bit more? Do you think, we'll talk a little bit more defense side here too. Do you think he's going to take a step forward defensively? How do you think he's going to really impress us next?
Yeah, well, I think he's going to be more of a power guy via just smacking the ball really hard liners-wise rather than being that absolute astronomical, holy shit, that was a bomb Ryan Howard or Anthony Rendon, if you want to compare him to a third baseman who will sometimes hit towering shots, along with Arenado, who sometimes hits more of those seaming liners in Colorado. I feel like he would hit more of those seaming liner homers rather than the towering shots. But I could see him this year getting to the high teens maybe in a full-blown season and then working his way up in his next season into the 20s and kind of going from there. But I see him being a great hitter, unlike the other guys we mentioned that are struggling a little bit in spring to hit for average thus far. Bohm isn't. He's hitting .320 in spring after hitting .333 when he came up to a .400 OBP and a .136, a freaking ridiculous OPS plus. I think Bohm's going to continue to hit the freaking cover off the baseball, but Girardi stressed it in a lot of his, it's usually the fourth inning interviews he has in the preseason with the announcers. He's impressed him defensively, so I think like you stressed and brought up, he will look his best defensively this year. He's made some charging plays that have really impressed me in the preseason, and I think that's going to continue. You're going to continue to see him get better. I mean, the dude's 6'5" at almost 220, so he has a big frame. He has to man over there at third base, and third base is a very difficult position, especially when you're that freaking huge. You don't see guys that big that often over there. So I think he has the ability to do it. We're seeing it in spring this year. He's showing up more on defense. He's still hitting the cover off the baseball. He talked about it in an interview today. He just loves being able to just kind of smack it around and hit the ball. And I think he's just going to get better and better. For me, I still see him hitting. I don't see him being a guy, honestly, that moves. He's not going to hit 338, but I still see him hitting around 300 somewhere probably, and getting the, like I said, I'll go 18. I'll give it a smooth high teens number at 18 for home runs, and then I'll give him in a full season 102 RBIs. So I think Bohm's going to hit three. I'll go 302. 18 homers and 102 RBIs for our second-year player now, Alec Bohm, in his first full season that hopefully eventually can have as many fans as possible.
Yeah, I don't know. I think 100 RBIs is a little high, especially if he's only hitting about 18 home runs on your projection. I agree with you. I think
gap doubles, Biscuit, gap doubles.
I just think that the number's going to be there, especially because, and this is something I want to bring up when I turn to you in a second, Rob. We don't really know where he's going to bat in the lineup. I think it's possible if he's in the 4-hole, he could get to 100 RBIs. I think that's still kind of unlikely just given the player he is right now in his career. But maybe there's definitely a possibility, but it depends where he bats. And, kind of like we had this conversation earlier when we first started about JT, this is a kind of a guy who you could pencil him really anywhere in the lineup. He could bat, maybe in the 6 or 7 spot. He could bat in the 2-hole. He could bat in the 4-hole. Rob, if you were Joe Girardi right now, where do you think you'd put Alec Bohm in the starting lineup?
See, I think he would be the best fit for the 4-hole. Just because I think he's already the best pure hitter on the team in terms of consistently making contact. He's going to be able to hit for a high average. As Borek alluded to, he can hit to the gaps. That's a big thing. So I think that he's the best fit for that 4-hole as a guy you can put behind Bryce and maybe kind of give teams, some reservations about pitching around Bryce because, you got Alec Bohm coming up behind him. And, he doesn't quite have the power that you ideally – I don't want to say he doesn't have the power, but he doesn't produce the home run totals yet. I guess it's the way I should word it for a guy that you want in the 4-hole. But he has that gap power, though. He can drive guys in by hitting those doubles, hitting the ball to left center, to right center, getting into the gaps there, getting those sac flies when you need them, just making contact in situations where contact is necessary, getting that RBI ground out, that RBI sac fly. He does a lot of things so well at the plate that I think he's ideal to have behind your number one power threat in the lineup. So, the 4 spot right behind Bryce doubles. Is a great spot for him.
Well, I love agreeing all the way tonight. I'm loving Rob more and more as time goes on when it comes to podcasting with him. We're agreeing all the way tonight. See, Biscuit, gap power. Look how many RBIs Chase got with gap power. Believe in the gap power.
Even without the gap power, his build, as you mentioned, him being 6'5", the guy's huge. He's gonna be able to hit to off fields for power, and he's not going to need to have to pull the ball. Now, I don't think that power is going to be here next season, but I do think it's going to be like someone like Christian Yelich, I think, or maybe Anthony Rendon too, where the power didn't come along until a little bit later, until they were a little bit older, and as they continue to develop and enter their prime. But we're looking at probably the best, most talented player who's came through the Phillies organization in quite some time. I mean, if Alec Bohm, I don't know if exactly what he did in 2020 is going to hold up and correlate like it did over a 162-game season, but this could be one of the best players that has actually come through the Phillies organization since the last time they were a championship team. So with that being said,
How about this? If he hits 338 in back-to-back seasons, you can all pimp slap me across the face on video because I don't see that happening. That's why I said 302.
if Alec Boehm hits 338 this season, if he hits 338, I'll kiss your ass. Like I would.
Yeah, but I don't want that. I would rather get pimp slapped across the face. That's why I offered that. So.
But my point being is I am willing to do a lot of things for an Alec Boehm 338 batting average season. But nonetheless, really, Andrew, what kind of, going back to my point here, is it too early to think that he's going to be the cornerstone player for the next decade here? Like, I know we have Bryce, but, like, you don't know what the next decade's going to look like. You know, what if this rebuild continues to falter and the team continues to miss the playoffs for the next couple of years and they decide to really strip down? You know, if that happens, it's very likely that Bryce could theoretically get moved. Do you think Alec Boehm in that situation, you know, do you think he could be like a cornerstone guy, the guy you continue to build around if shit hits the fan here?
Can he be? Absolutely. I think you saw it last year what he's able to do with that 338 average. You saw what he's able to do driving runs. I think it's a little early to call him that, and he's going to like automatically be that cornerstone here. I think for me, I feel like I'm a little harsher sometimes when grading that kind of stuff because for me personally, I need to see more than just 1 year. I need to see him at least in a full year. He wasn't even up for a full season last year, so I need to see him be able to duplicate that. I mean, a lot of times you just kind of see a sophomore slump from somebody. You kind of see all these different things that mentally, maybe confidence-wise. So for me, I need to see another year before I say he can absolutely be that cornerstone. I mean, I'm not taking anything away from him. I think the potential's there, obviously. I just need to see him do it for a second time, is my opinion. And that usually goes around for anyone. And I think, Borek, you can back me up on that. That's the way I usually grade everybody.
Yeah, you do. You typically stay steady with that. I mean, I just think with his talent level, seeing him will consistently hit around 300 in his career. But I agree with you in terms of a cornerstone. There's guys that have consistently hit around 300 you wouldn't necessarily consider your top mumbo jumbo of your team. Like JD Martinez is a guy you have mixed into guys you build around. He's usually hit around 300. That not necessarily the top mumbo jumbo. So it depends what he becomes as a 300 hitter. So I do see what you're saying.
So what do we think, guys? I'll start with you, Bork. Well, actually, you said around 300. You already went. We'll go to Rob here. Let's jump to Rob.
I'm in the same ballpark. I think, probably right around 300, hopefully a little bit north of that. I think the power numbers, hopefully go up a little bit. I think that he makes such great contact that he's going to run into some home runs. So I could see him pushing maybe, I don't want to say 20 quite yet, but somewhere in the 15 range. But if he does end up in that 4 spot, then I think the RBI totals could be up near 100. So, and ideally, I think 300, I made that estimate. I think that's a little bit conservative. I think he has the ability to hit, 315, 320. I'm not ready to go there yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if he did. So yeah, 300, I'll go 15 homers. I'll go close to 100 RBIs.
Awesome. Andrew, what do you think?
Yeah, I'll say 295 to 300. So I'll probably say about 297 average. I think he'll hit a little more than 15 home runs, be around 20. So I'll say 18. I'll say 18 home runs and about 94 RBIs. I think it's going to be, I expect him to be in the 4 or 5 spot in the lineup coming up in this year. He's off to a great start in spring training as well. I know spring training numbers you got to be careful with, but he's doing well in spring training as well. His average is still hitting high. I think he's hitting he's in 320 so far in spring. So I think he'll be there for this season and be able to help provide middle of the lineup a spark.
It's funny, Rob. You said you were going to go a little more conservative with your projection about his batting average and set 300, and then Andrew, you dropped down to the 290s, and I'm actually going to drop down to the 280s. I'm going to go on record and say that I think he's going to have kind of a middling to his career but good. Like, it's going to be a good season overall, like on paper, but like in terms of what he's going to continue to grow and develop to be, I don't think we're going to have as sexy of a year from him as we will in the future. So I'm going to say batting average probably in the 280s. 15 to 20 home runs. I'm going to say, in that range. Could be 18, could be 20, could be 17, whatever. But, more 340s, 350 on base percentage. It's not going to be glamorous, but it's still going to be good. And like I said, I don't think there's really a way to go back to what you said about him hitting 338, Borek. I just don't think there's a way to sustain that. That's fucking beautiful if he does, but I just don't think that's sustainable. So I'm going to go 280s batting average, maybe 15 to 20 home runs, although that could change depending on where he's batting. But now we're going to jump to the outfield as we go to our final three positions of the night, and we're going to start with Old Man McCutcheon, Uncle Larry, Lawrence McCutcheon, as Howard Eskin might call him. But coming off the injury during the 2019 season, Andrew McCutcheon it wasn't what you really want for him, especially on the defensive side. He was abysmal in the outfield. The bat wasn't much better. It did get better as the season went on, but just to run through him real fast, a little more than 200 at bats. He had a little shy of 220 at bats, 55 hits, batting average in the 250s. I think the biggest thing that stunk with Andrew McCutcheon offensively is that his on-base percentage was down. So he has a career on-base percentage of 376. That was in the 320s, which, obviously a shortened season, but I believe that would have been one of the lowest marks of his career, if not the lowest mark of his career. So definitely not a good sign there. Plus the defense is, still a question mark, but now, plenty of time removed from that injury. He, almost 2 years since when it happened, had a lot of time to recover. He's looked quicker this spring training. It looks like he has a little bit bat speed back. Looks like he's not, holding his back much in the outfield anymore. Rob, let's start with you here. Are you still concerned at all about Andrew McCutcheon? Do you think we're going to see him to continue to kind of go on a not so much a downward spiral, but definitely continue to trend downward as a ball player this season?
Actually, I don't. I think that what we'll see from him this upcoming season is kind of holding steady with what he gave us last year, at 250-ish, maybe a little bit higher, maybe pushing 260 batting average. He did hit 10 home runs in a shortened season, which, if my math is right, comes to almost 30 for a full season. I don't know. I'm not that great with math. But yeah, the power was there, and the RBIs, he had 34 RBIs, which is, it's decent. So I think that he's going to be able to hold the line with what he was able to perform at last season. I honestly, I suspect him to be right around the same. And then I suspect him to kind of go back to the same kind of plate discipline that he had in his first season before the injury, where he's out there drawing walks. The on base is going to be up a little bit. I could see the on base, I'd say, being north of 350, somewhere between 350 to 360. The average, I'm going to put the average in at about 255. So right on line with what he was last season. Homers, I don't think that he continues on that pace. I think maybe 25 is a nice number for him. And the ribs, I think you could put him at about 85 to 90 ribs.
I think that's fair for the most part, all around there. The biggest thing I think you want out of McCutcheon would be him getting on base. And you're right, that was him being the table center at the top of the lineup is one of the things that really looked good about the Phillies in 2019. He didn't have that same, he didn't really carry those same on base skills into 2020. But maybe given that it was a shortened season, he just needed to, pick it up a little bit more. You do hope to see him build off that in 2021. Andrew, what do you think? Are you concerned about the, injury history, getting older? Are you concerned at all about him?
I'm not really concerned with his offensive approach. I think he's able to adjust to the game and adapt. I mean, if you look at the beginning part of his career, he was more of an average hitter, had a very good batting average type hitter. And then with the average kind of dropping, he he was able to increase his walk percentage and kind of figure that out with on base percentage to kind of even it out a little bit, and that's what made him such a good leadoff hitter through the Kapler years and everything. Just because of the ability to kind of, even with his batting average down, he was able to even it out there by drawing walks. So the offensive side, I'm not really concerned about. The defense, I am concerned about. I know he's a full year removed now from the injury, so I do expect him to get somewhat of his legs back. But, I mean, like you say, he's a year older now. We saw some of the struggles in the outfield, so that's where I'm more concerned about him on the defensive side more than anything. But in terms of his offensive numbers, I don't expect them to be too much different. Like Rob said, probably about 255 hitter, just like he's been. But I think he's got 22 home runs in him and probably about 80. I'll go about 80 to 85 RBIs as well, depending if he stays in that leadoff spot. Because obviously, if he's leading off, he'll have less of an opportunity to drive and runs than some other guys. So.
Yeah, I think to talk about Rivys for a second, I think that number will be a little bit lower just because I do expect he'll be leading off. So maybe at the highest, I would think the 80s if he's really on. Wouldn't be much higher than that, but if I had to guess, I would say in the 60s or 70s range right now. But you're right, and with the DH not coming into the National League this year, it really does limit what you can do with him in terms of getting him days off, but keeping him in the lineup, because you still do expect him to be able to get on base at a good clip to be a table setter for the lineup. But that's another hurdle the Phillies have to overcome now. Borek, what do you think? What's your outlook for Andrew McCutchen this season?
I honestly, I'm with Rob. I mean, I see from a perspective of the injury setting and he's aging, why, Andrew, you would worry about his fielding. It's just from looking at him in spring, he seems to kind of have that spunk, that kind of swagger back mentality, where he kind of seems to have the fire in his step again, where I feel like he won't go back to what he once was at fielding, obviously, but I don't think he'll be what he was last year either. So I think he'll be at least an average fielder out there. And he's been one of my most impressive guys of spring training this far. He's hitting over 300. I still think in season he's more around a 260, 265 guy at this time of his career. But if he can put that together, put up the high 80s at 88 to about 90 RBIs, be a good table setter, or if someone takes over the leadoff spot, be a good guy wherever he goes in the order, and be consistent and at least average on defense. I still think he has a chance with the legs. It seems like he has in spring to be a notch above average in left, because left is one of the, out of the three defensive outfield positions, in my opinion, is probably the easiest. So yeah, that's why you see some of those guys go out there that are like basically bricks for feet when it comes to their speed out there, like Pat Burrell, for example. So that's why I think Kutch will really be able to move. We might see him use his speed a bit more. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets like high single digits or maybe 10 stolen bases too, with how I've seen him move in spring. And I would say in terms of home runs, I see about like 22 to 23 at this point of his career. That's where I put him. So like 265, 88 to 90 RBIs, and 22 to 23 home runs, with at least being average in the field with a chance with how he's looked to be above average. So.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think batting average wise, I'd be pretty shocked if he hit in the 260s. I don't think he's hit over 260 since his 2017 season. So I'd be surprised if he had a pretty good batting average like that. I mean, I'm hoping he does, obviously. But, everything else, I think the power is going to be in the, low to mid 20s in terms of home runs. The big thing is that he continues to get on base. I think if the defense is, below average, middling, and he's still getting on base at a decent clip, though, and being a good table setter, I think that's fine, specifically knowing that he's coming off the books and that, he probably won't be back at the end of after this season, he won't be returning. But, Andrew, let's start with you. Give me your projections.
I think McCutchen. I think I did my McCutchen ones with. I said the 255 there.
My bad.
Hey, you're good. I just said 255, 22 home runs, and about 80 to 85 RBIs.
Rob, you didn't go, right?
I went, yes.
Oh, my bad.
Very good.
You kind of glossed over, so I'll go as well. My bad, gentlemen. So basically, I'm going to say 250 batting average even. The on base percentage, I want to be optimistic and say over 350, but I'm going to say in the 340s for right now. I do think you start to see kind of the beginning of the end of the road for Andrew McCutchen's wonderful career with both, the Pirates, Yankees, Giants, and the Philadelphia Phillies. Truly one of the best I got to watch growing up. But I do think as he continues to, age here, you're going to see him get less and less playing time. I'd be shocked if he really, really had a very, very strong year. But like I said, if he's still getting on base, hopefully the defense takes a step forward. That's really all you can ask for coming off his 2020 season. But we'll transition on to definitely the most interesting position on the diamond, the one where we still really don't know who's going to be there. I mean, I'm sure we all have a pretty solid hunch of who's going to be the opening day center fielder. I'm just going to say he who must not be named, Odubel Herrera. I think it's fair to say he's played the best. Not that there's been much conversation. I don't think Roman Quinn has looked very good. Scott Kingery has looked abysmal.
Hey, Roman Quinn's hitting 318. Don't you diss my man.
How many times
and I usually come at Roman Quinn.
Struck out?
How many
times has he struck out, Joe?
What?
How many times has he struck out, though?
He's hitting 318. He can strike out as many fucking times as he wants if he hits 318.
Plus, have you seen him play center field? He's like a lost puppy. He can't play the outfield.
No, yeah, I agree. That's what I don't love about Kingery and Quinn. Both play a deceitful when people think they're playing a decent center field because their speed allows them to get to the ball. It's not because they run good routes. That's right. Also why I think Moniak should have got more of a chance when he only plays a little bit in spring training, but that's something I'll get into later in a couple minutes, I guess.
No, you bring up a great point with Moniak. Look, I think I love what I've seen from Mickey Moniak this spring, but I think it's fair to say too that yes, while you would like to see him get more starting time, he's not ready. One good spring training is not enough to throw him into the fray of having him start every single day at the major leagues if he's not ready. Look, if you went back a year ago, you would think, oh, we're talking about Mickey Moniak like he's a complete bust. Now he's looking like he's turning into a competent major league ball player who could be an everyday caliber player.
Yeah, but Biscuit, my point I was making to Andrew earlier before we started a video we did earlier on the Sixers was you have the preseason start, or excuse me, you have the minor league season start a month after the baseball season if everything goes to par, which is what happened in hockey. In hockey, when the season started a month later, you saw guys make the team just for that first month, so they were not just in this limbo period if they had a good camp and everything. I think since Moniak he could at least be like almost in a trial period, especially when your other options are Odubel Herrera, who every poll I've looked at online from everybody, nobody wants to see make the team. And you have Quinn, who's an injury risk. And like you said, does strike out a lot, is hitting better this year, but doesn't play a smooth center fielder at all. Kingery's not really a center fielder, so he doesn't play a smooth center field. Moniak plays the best center field defensively, and if he can even hit 244 to 250, that might be better than the other option of making a guy that nobody wants to make it. You got to listen to the fans, too. Or Quinn, who committing to him as a starter when you know Moniak, if Hazley's not back by the time Quinn goes down, will be starting eventually anyway, just because of Quinn's unfortunate injury history.
Well, that's kind of what I wanted to get to at this position anyway. Rather than projecting what the center fielder who we think is going to be on opening day, what we think they're going to do, rather than projecting who that person even is going to be at this point. So I don't think it's going to be any one of these guys who's going to get the majority of reps. I mean, someone sure will get the majority, obviously, but I think you're going to see a lot of these guys sprinkled out. Andrew, I'll turn to you here. If you had to guess right now which one of these guys, you could throw Adam Hazley in there, Herrera, Quinn, Kingery. Who do you think's going to get the most of the time there throughout the regular season?
I really think it's gonna be similar to last year. I think Adam Hazley's probably gonna lean toward or get the majority when he comes back. But we all know how big of a fan Girardi is of Quinn. Joe, Borek, like you mentioned, you're right. The fans don't want Herrera here, and the team knows that. I don't think they brought him into spring training. I think more of a piece to try to ploy as a guy that still has it. They're going to try to trade him once spring training's over. You got to remember he was an invite where he's not even on the 40-man roster. So even if he makes the team, you're going to have to end up cutting someone off the 40-man roster, which is why he still has a long shot to make the team. Yes, he might be playing the best, but I don't think he's here to stay for opening day or the season. So I really think Herrera will be moved at some point via trade. And that's where I think, listen, Quinn's batting over 300. Yes, he's striking out a lot, but if you think about it, a lot of these guys in spring training are striking out a lot. So that's why I'm not going to fault Quinn for it, because when everyone else is doing the same thing, if you're going to penalize him, you got to penalize everybody else for it. Like Scott Kingery striking out a very high percentage. He's got 12. Bryce Harper's got 8 strikeouts. Hoskins has 8. Quinn has 8. So all these guys have been striking out. I think that's kind of what spring training is, to get a feel for yourself. So personally, I think Quinn and Adam Hazley, once he comes back from injury, are going to platoon just like we saw last year. And I think that's a spot that's going to be a hole in this lineup probably for a little while. I think Adam Hazley hasn't shown yet he can play every day. I don't think Quinn has showed he can play every day. Biscuit, I'm kind of like you. Moniak's had one good spring training. Does he deserve a shot eventually? Yes. I think it's a little early to say, okay, here's the keys to opening day center field spot. So I'm not ready to announce him the opening day starter in terms of that argument. So I think Quinn's going to be the opening day guy. And then when the season goes, I think Quinn and Hazley are going to split time there. And Kingery's going to just be your super utility guy, infield and outfield, and maybe a possible deadline acquisition in center.
Yeah, and
Can I say one thing real quick, Biscuit, on Moniak? I don't want to crown him the opening day starter. I'm just going by kind of like how Stephen A says about teams that are depleted. When you don't have a greater option, you might as well give the guy that seems like he could be the future guy, that feels the position by far the best, other than maybe Hazley, that feels the position the best of everyone we aforementioned. That's why I feel like it being the minors doesn't start for a month. It's kind of a what the hell thing. Like, if he does good in spring, give him a shot. Worst comes to worst, you're sending him back down. Hazley will be ready in that first month if he's not ready right away, which is not expected. So then you would have him be able to come back in, and like Andrew said, he'll probably get a lot of the reps when he first comes back in. Anywho, so then you can let Moniak go down. That's just my approach. I'm not trying to say this dude's going to come in and make the All-Star team in his first season and be great. I just think if he performs the best up there with Herrera in his first 23 at-bats of spring, he should get recognition for it and get more playing time. That's all I'm coming from.
I understand that, but I think what's more important here is, sure, if he breaks camp with the team and he's the opening day center fielder, that's great. But what if he struggles out the gate? And do you send him down? The whole point of him being up is that he's going to get playing time every single day. You don't bring up
exactly
for him to ride the bench. And if something goes wrong, your only options are to have him ride the bench or to send him back down. And
that's what I think they would do. Because if you bring him up and he struggles, then you would.
That's not good for his confidence. And sure, the season, the league season isn't going to start for a month later, but at the same time, when it does start, he'll be able to get a daily stream of at-bats down there, regardless of how he's performing. And I think for the longevity of this situation and the long-term outlook for this team, what's more important? Getting him that more time to develop, to figure the things out, to can let him continue to work on what he's been building off of. I think that's more important than picking up now and rushing him and having him in a situation where he's going to underperform. Let him continue to develop. Let him continue to grow. And we're going to need him at some point in this outfield in the future. With Kutch coming off the book and center field still being a clown show, 2 spots are up for grabs. And one of those could easily be Moniak's by the end of next season. I also think another point to that is that he's still young. He's still too damn
I agree with that. It's just I've always been a guy that loved giving prospects a shot when I think they've had a good spring when you have no better options, especially. Like, it's not like you have the
But
best scenario. Quinn might be hitting solid, but like you said, his strikeout concerned. Plus, he doesn't play a very smooth center field whatsoever. So I would rather also, when a guy's hitting strong in spring, not have him sit in a limbo, weird camp situation for a month. That's just the other side I'm coming from, where I think this guy is a part of our future. That's why I don't think it'll interfere with his confidence if Girardi approaches it the right way. And you're saying this is almost like how the NHL has trial parts in their contracts. This is almost like we're giving you a chance here. Let's see what you could do in the first month. Prove to us that you could stay up, and then if you don't, we'll know what you really need to work on once you start the minors. Because if you go to that limbo camp thing, it's not like you really understand yourself better and grow as a hitter from learning from mistakes, because you're just doing simulated stuff in camp. So I would rather have him playing live games. That's just the side I'm coming from there. I also think he has a good chance to make the team, because if you're looking at our outfield with Hazley injured, you have Harper, Kutch, and Quinn. Other than that, you only have guys that platoon into the outfield, like the Millers of the world and the Kingerys of the world. So I would think Moniak would be favored to potentially make the opening day roster, in my humble opinion, of the 26. So if he's doing that, you might as well start the better fielder. That's my other side of it as well.
But
Yeah.
I disagree here, because if you have a guy like Moniak, you're either going to crown him the opening day starter or you're going to have him start in the minors. You don't want a guy like him getting just an
He's not
at bat a
starting
game.
in a minor. He's starting in a taxi squad period for a month.
So
until
what's the difference if he's in the taxi squad, still working out with the professional guys every day, or just not getting any at bats? He's not going to get any at bats either way if you're not going to crown him the opening day starter, but put him on the bench, and that doesn't help him.
Well, that's what I just said. That's what I said at the end of my statement. If he makes the opening day roster, the better fielder should start, which is Mickey Moniak. He should be the starter, not Roman Quinn. Roman Quinn does not play a very smooth center field, like we all said. So,
But I disagree. I think Roman Quinn better suits this team to start on opening day, because again, Moniak, I think he's a guy that will eventually be up, maybe this season or maybe next season. I think he has the potential to be better than Hazley. But again, a guy that, like, he's only had 18 spring at bats. Like, put that together. Yes, he's off to a good start, but it's 18 spring at bats where, again, he's not facing top-notch pitching every day. Like, he's not facing Max Scherzer. He's not facing Jacob deGrom. Like, you got to remember, like, that when you start the regular season, it's going to be a whole different world.
no,
So
I
think
agree with that, but
you're
that's
gonna
also because they haven't put him in situations like Ricky and Ben and Ruben and others have said during the whole preseason, when he's been out hitting guys like Kingery, who keeps getting consistently put in the lineup. And Biscuit knows how much I like Kingery, but he's fucking sucked this spring.
Hold on. It
So
benefits,
why is Moniak
Joe,
not getting
Borek,
more
this is
time?
why. It benefits you a lot better as a team to get Kingery going. Kingery is more valuable to this team right now to opening day than Mickey Moniak is. Scott Kingery needs to be ready for opening day, because he's going to be, as we mentioned, your super utility. He's got to be ready to play center field. He's got to be ready to come in at second or short or third, etc. Like, that's why it values to give Kingery those at bats. Spring training isn't, okay, we're gonna just give away at bats for the starters. Yes, you still have to evaluate, but spring training is to get these guys ready who's going to make the team. That's I think where you're
now
missing
you can
here.
give guys like Jankowski, like whatever he has, like 18 at bats, hitting 230 something. Like, you could have gave Moniak some more of his at bats.
You know, I'll agree with you, Borek. I think he could get some more at bats against more major league pitchers. I agree with you there. But with that being said, too, Mickey Moniak was never the guy who they thought, you're most likely going to be our center fielder. Like, there's a reason that.
Now, that was probably Hazley coming in, I would think.
There's a reason that Kingery Quinn, and Herrera are getting most of the reps, because those are the guys who have been in the major leagues. Those are the guys who you relied on before. And, I think the fan base is kind of over it. But in the organization's case, they still think there's a lot of talent amongst the three of them. And they're trying to squeeze something out of it, which I don't think is wrong of them to try to do, especially when you have someone like Moniak who does need that time in the minors still. He's just not ready. He's just not ready, and I'd rather let him go get another year and have him come up next year when he's still just only 23 years old, and he slots in a little bit more feasibly. But right now, I just don't think it's the time, and that stings. I would like to see more from the guy, but I just do think he needs a little bit more time in the minors. But just jumping ships here because we are coming up on the hour 40 mark of the show. We're going to move, and I know we don't really have a designated center fielder yet, so it's kind of hard to go to those projections. But so we'll skip that one for now. But let's just transition over to the last but not least, certainly probably the most fun player to talk about on this team, our star right fielder Bryce Harper. Bryce, came out of the gate really hot last year. Had a hell of a first half of the shortened season. Did slow up in the second half due to that back injury. Missed a little playing time. He was hurting because of that back. But still, I think a pretty solid number. If this got expanded over 162, I don't know how you could be disappointed. 13 home runs, 268 batting average, 33 RBIs. On base percentage it was 420, OPS 962, OPS plus 157. Very, very solid numbers overall. Do you think we could get that over 162, Borek? What do you think?
Bryce Harper, I expect to honestly have his best season in Philly this year. I think this is going to be the year. You got the even more and more as time goes on, dad power from Bryce Harper, because that gets stronger as time goes on, not weaker. So I think you're going to see him have a very good season, be around that 100 RBIs, probably over, honestly. I think he's going to be more in his very good season this year, around at least 110 RBIs. And I look for him to bring down his strikeout numbers a little bit, which obviously the back, like you hinted at, Biscuit, probably factored into having a few more strikeouts. I mean, I played just in travel ball through a bad back, and let me tell you, it is a bitch. When you try to hit with a shitty back, it is a real bitch. So, yeah, I definitely feel for that, and I think that's honestly what is attributed entirely to his numbers sinking in the second half, and that's it. That's why I think he's going to hit at least, I would say, Bryce, if you look at his career averages, 276. Last year he had 268 in the shortened.
Did we lose you, Borek?
Have a hell of a season this year and be up there. I don't know if he'll get it, but he'll be up there somewhere in a nice quota, top 4 in the MVP. We'll see where he gets at the end of the year, but somewhere up there in a nice quota. And I think he'll get over 100 walks too. He had 99 in his first year here and had 130 with the Nats. I think this year is the year you'll see him get over 100 with the Phillies.
Yeah, that certainly would be great to see. Andrew, what do you think?
Yeah, I think Harper's gonna have his. I guess I can agree with. It's tough to say he's gonna have his best as a Philly, like 114 RBIs in 2019. That's gonna be a pretty tough mark to beat there. So I don't know if I can. I think he'll be around there. I mean, that again, maybe average wise he can improve from that season, but in terms of that production, it's gonna be pretty hard to beat for Harper to get not only repeat those numbers, which I think he can do, but like beat those numbers. Especially he only missed 5 games that year, so you figure he'll play around 157 again. So I don't think any fan has anything to worry about in Harper. I want to remind everyone, all the fans out there, that he does usually get off to slow starts. So before everyone complains about how bad Harper is, like we have seen the last 2 years, just remember he's going to turn it around. He'll be fine. He's the least guy you got to worry about on the team. But no, I think final numbers, I'd say for the season, I think he'll probably go about 262 average. I'll say about 33 to 35 home runs, and I'll say 107 RBIs.
Yeah, that seems about right. I think, I think maybe he creeps into the 270s. His batting average was up a little bit from the past two seasons in 2020, albeit the shortened season. So you do hope to see that continues to go up. OPS, I'd like to see my projections in the 900s, in the 960 range. Home runs, you'd love to see 40 out of him again. I think a 40 home run by season would be a lot of fun to watch. I think it'll be in the mid-30s range, probably about 35 to 38 in that range somewhere. But if he's doing that while batting in the 260s, 270s with 100 RBIs or so and 100 walks, I don't know how you can be unhappy about that. But that'll wrap up our show, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, thank you for joining us today. It's always a pleasure to bring content to our fans. If you like what you're listening to, always rate and subscribe, rate and review the podcast. And we'll be signing off for Andrew, Borek, and Biscuit. Have a good night, everyone, and take care.
I used to be revered and feared through Killarney. Now I'm back to hitching with the wind. But if Mickey Flynn should ever find me, I'll throw me caution behind me and square off on that son of a bitch again. He cracked open a river too, he beat me Sunday through and through, and such over my unconscious frame. I won me healthy sheriff fights, well lucky son still had me life since Mickey Flynn beat me dumb and lame.